millions affected by autism.
No visual contact. She wasn't speaking. I didn't know how to help her.
Could an experimental treatment be the breakthrough parents have been desperate for?
The second day of treatment were the first words I had heard from my daughter.
And why others aren't so sure.
It hasn't even been submitted to the FDA.
Then, can your cup of joe cause migraines?
Raise the risk by 161%.
Plus, Justin Bieber's anxiety cure.
He's got the Bieber fever!
Yeah! That's today.
An autism diagnosis can be devastating. And for one single mom, it has affected every single aspect of her life.
The first time I realized something wasn't right was in infancy. I noticed Noam wasn't making eye contact. He was delayed, sitting up, crawling, walking. So I knew something wasn't right. Noam was diagnosed with autism at 26 months old. Life felt really bleak for a while. Being a mom with two sons is amazing. Noam is 12 and Asher is 9.
My brother, he has special needs. He has autism, which means he can't talk, he can't control going to the bathroom. Sometimes he has tantrums if it's really severe.
I don't really leave the house much with him because I don't want to deal with that in public. I know he must feel so much frustration in there, and I just want him to be able to express it.
Because he has autism, it's not like we can play board games together or anything like that, but we're still brothers. He likes to play on the trampoline a lot, and I play on the trampoline with him.
Being a single mom is a big juggling act. It takes a high level of strength and mental health to get through each day. Not really having any mode of communication is the toughest part.
She does so much. She's a great mom. I love her very much.
We still haven't found the intervention that's going to make the difference for him, but we do have this just fervent belief that it's out there. I would love to hear him say, "I love you, Mom."
We have Leah joining us today, and thank you for being here and sharing your story. And off the bat, I'm going to say it is just so obvious how much love you have for your kids. And what has been the most challenging part, though, thus far?
I would say the most challenging part is just the juggling act. Being a single parent of 2 boys, sometimes I have to remember to give them both attention. Asher can fall through the cracks, so we have to make an effort to have quality time with each of them as opposed to always being able to do things as a family unit.
And what type of support system do you have?
Well, I've been very blessed to have attracted this incredible nanny who is a godsend. I call him my own Mother Teresa because I don't know what I would do without him. He loves the boys like his own. He's become a father figure, and we're so blessed to have his support and his help.
What's his name?
Alan.
Shout out to Alan. Those pictures are beautiful. What hope do you have for Noam's future? What would that look like in the best possible way?
Well, I'm a very spiritual person, so I like to believe in, the sky being the limit, and I'd love to see him leading a completely typical life. But for sure, having speech would be a dream come true. I think that's a big source of frustration for him is that he can't communicate his preferences. So just to hear him say what his wants, his needs, his desires are, I believe that's just a God-given right for all of us to have that gift of expression, and I want that so badly for him.
And I think anyone watching our show realizes that every child with autism presents differently, and how you treat them and how they progress, it's different. So on our show, we're always thinking about new possibilities. And I want to introduce everyone to someone in our audience, Dr. Spencer Miller, because Dr. Miller, can you tell us a little bit about a unique treatment that you offer that may have some hope, and certainly for a mom like Leah who feels out of options, and it's called MeRT.
Right.
Can you tell me what that is and how it works?
Yes, so MeRT is an emerging technology. It is experimental in some regards that actually tries to reprogram abnormal electrical signals in the brain. We measure the electrical signals using a quantitative EEG, so it's a very simple, common used practice in neurology, where we put a cap on the head and look at where abnormal signals are coming from. We then turn around with that data and use these electrical signals to send back in the brain and try to attempt to re-attenuate or to modulate these brain signals. And the changes that we measure on these repeated EEGs should correlate to behavioral changes.
And the child looked very comfortable. Didn't look like there was any pain associated with the procedure at all.
Non-invasive, no medication involved with it, no pain. Sometimes you can feel a little bit of an electrical pulse, but it's a mild tap on the forehead.
How many treatments typically do you need to administer, and how soon do you see results, and what have the results been?
Usually within the first couple of days or weeks, you can start to see some benefits, some changes in their behavior. In general, we recommend about 4 weeks to 6 weeks of treatment. The treatments are every day, 30 minutes or so. So they come to the clinic, get the stimulation, and go about their daily business. So some children will have significant behavioral changes very early. Some will take longer to get results. You know, this is all new. And like I said, it's kind of evolving over time.
In your experience, what kind of results are you getting in terms of the number of kids who are showing a benefit, a change in behavior? Do you have a number or percentage?
So I don't have a percentage with me, but for the patients that I have seen changes in behavior, it's typically just exactly what you're asking for. Language in general is one of those things that seems to really be commonly changed. The way that they interact with their environment, their ability to change from, you know, we have to go to a doctor's appointment at 7 today instead of 8, so we're gonna have to change our schedule so there's not a meltdown in your car trying to go to a doctor's appointment. The other thing that we hear a lot of parents talk about is the presence, which, you know, is not really a medical term, but you know what I'm talking about. If your child is not there with you, even though they're sitting right in front of you, you're talking to them, there's just this absence. And so to be able to feel like your child is with you and listening or understanding you, so we hear parents describe those type of behavioral improvements.
And what potential side effects do you discuss with patients when you're talking about this procedure?
So the one that is the most feared really is not that big of a deal. However, we have to discuss it. It's about a 1 in 150,000 chance of having a seizure. It's self-limited. A seizure is abnormal signals of the brain. We're reprogramming the brain, so you can imagine that that's a potential. But the seizure that would occur would be self-limited. You stop the stimulation, the seizure goes away. And I don't know of any cases where treatment has been administered and caused a seizure that then results in epilepsy or the epilepsy syndrome, where you have continuous seizures throughout your life. So I don't know of that to be the case.
So to me, really exciting. Acknowledging, however, that it is still experimental. And right now we have clinical neuroscientist Dr. Lindsay Oberman joining us today via Skype to weigh in. And you've heard our discussion, and I think you're also well aware of how frustrating it can be for parents trying to find anything that might help. What's your take, as we've been discussing this, in terms of treating autism with MeRT, and where do you stand on the issue?
So I've been using TMS and other brain stimulation tools. MeRT is a form of TMS, transcranial magnetic stimulation. I've been doing this for about 15 years. And in the individuals with autism, both adults and children. And TMS and MeRT uses a very large magnetic field, where we know that magnetic field can modulate brain networks and brain circuits. The question remains as to what brain circuit do we want to modulate, and in what way that will lead to a positive change in terms of behaviors. So we want to be improving language. We want to be improving things like reducing the meltdowns or improving social interaction or presence, as he mentioned. But what types of protocols with types of brain stimulation do we need to put in to do that is still unknown. So the concern as a research field that we have is that there's only been one single, very small scale clinical trial in individuals with autism, it was adults in fact, that showed very small improvements over a placebo control condition where there was no magnetic field at all. And so the concern we have is that there's just not this scientific evidence base out yet. The FDA has not approved it. It hasn't even been submitted to the FDA because the trials have just simply not been conducted. So we are hoping that those types of trials can be done and will be done. But until then, we are just simply not recommending that it be used clinically.
And I know it's still experimental and you're still learning, but just based on the experiences you've had, is there a way to tell which autistic children are more likely to respond to treatment?
No, so there are metrics that are trying to be identified, whether it be EEG or MRI or other brain-based metrics, to try to say this person will be most likely a responder to TMS or drugs or behavioral therapy across a number of disorders, depression, anxiety, other disorders as well. And that metric has, again, unfortunately not been identified as of yet.
I think this is such an important topic, one we will continue to discuss. Let's take a break.
Coming up,
We need to all demand that clinical trials are done in a way where parents have answers. We don't like our children to be guinea pigs.
then
As time passed, it became worse. It was like a jail that she was trapped into. No visual contact. She wasn't listening to her name. Her sister started speaking. She stopped speaking. Our family was in so much pain.
that's coming up.
MeRT is an emerging technology that tries to reprogram abnormal electrical signals in the brain. We put a cap on the head and look at where abnormal signals are coming from. We then turn around with that data and use this electromagnetic coil to send electrical signals back in the brain and try to re-attenuate or to wake up or to modulate these brain signals.
I want to open this up to discussion really quickly because as I'm listening, of course, I'm uninitiated. I've never been around this treatment. I've never seen it administered. But I also will look at Leigh and think, wow, sure seems like it's worth a try to me. And that's why I want to ask both you, Lindsay, and also Dr. Miller, how do you go about making that decision? Because what would be the downside to trying it if, as Leigh has attested, you know, nothing else has really helped Noam get to the place you would like him to get to? So I'll open the floor for your comments on that.
So the downside would be no benefit at all the time you would pour into something like this type of a treatment. Again, 6 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks every day. You know, the downside would really be that there is no effect, which we do have children that have gone through 4 to 6 weeks and get no effect or no change in their behavior. What's interesting to note, though, is that we do have research that currently shows that there are specific EEG changes in a autistic brain. And it's not a new tool by any means, but we're starting to understand how, by utilizing EEG to analyze autistic patients, how it can actually help us understand what's going on in the brain. Because we don't know what causes it. You know, we don't really have a cure for it. None of these type of treatments that we're talking about really are FDA approved. They're all off-label. You know, it's important to understand that. However, like you say, there's really no
Can I ask
major
two
downside.
questions? How much would it cost, for instance, for a 4 to 6 week treatment
somewhere
cycle?
around $10,000.
Which is,
yeah.
and that's an important question to ask
varies per
because
clinic, you know, so-
the cost is always a downside, right?
Absolutely.
If you get no benefit and you pay for something, that's a
Absolutely.
downside.
You feel like a terrible person when you know, after somebody has done that treatment and you're, wow, I appreciate what you've been through, but that's a lot of money to say, hey, sorry, it didn't work, you know.
And then I'll bring you back in, Lindsay. It seems to me that a good clinical trial would answer a lot of these questions. Is there one happening? How close are we to maybe being able to say, this is the right protocol, this is how it should be done nationally, if you're going to try this?
Yes, so 2 things. I do not want to give the impression that I don't think this is promising because I've been doing it myself for about 15 years. I do believe in it. I believe that I know we can modulate the brain using TMS to improve functioning of various circuitry. That being said, it's not simply that it may not work, but we may modulate it in a way that makes things worse. And this is, as a researcher, as a parent myself, what I would worry most about. When we talk about risks, yes, there's a very small risk of inducing a seizure, 1 in thousands. However, a bigger risk is that we are shifting the functioning of a brain, especially in a child, a developing brain, that we don't know exactly where it is at this current moment. You certainly can do an EEG, but EEGs change millisecond to millisecond. It is not a simple static state that a person stays in for days or months in an EEG. So we can measure this, but there isn't the data out there that we can confidently say, I know what protocol that may help you. And there is a potential downside is that I may modulate your brain in a way that may not be positive, that may actually lead to impairment or a greater symptom in a certain domain, because I'm not sure which way to modulate which part of the brain.
Lindsay, let me ask you this, and then we have to take a break. If we've been providing these treatments for 15 years, my curiosity is how come we don't have any trials? That is really frustrating for me.
It is.
Dr. Mill, where are we in terms of getting some really good data so that maybe a few years from now we can say this is the treatment protocol and this is what you should do, and if that doesn't work, then this?
I mean, are you gathering data with your treatment of the patients you're doing?
We keep a data set. You know, every single day that the patients come in, the parents will describe symptoms. We can follow the CARS score, which is the Childhood Autism Rating Scale, things like that. But one of the limitations, exactly what you're saying, the limitations is that we don't even have a unified way of measuring what autism is, right? It's a spectrum that doesn't really even have a cause that we know yet. And so that is one limitation. What we would have to probably do is focus more on behavior or symptoms that we're trying to modify and move from there into a clinical trial, and then eventually evolve into, well, when your child has this behavioral change, this is the protocol for it, or this is how we attenuate it. MeRT is a little different in a sense also, even a variation to that, in the sense that we're not really treating a brain disorder. We're treating what we see on the EEG. In other words, we're re-attenuating the abnormalities we see regardless of what the diagnosis is. And so it's a unique type of treatment approach.
And no easy answers here, but what I do want to do is take a quick break, and when we come back, we're actually going to meet a mom whose daughter received this experimental treatment. We'll talk to her when we return.
Coming up.
As time passed, it became worse. It was like a jail that she was trapped into. No visual contact. She wasn't listening to her name. Her sister started speaking. She stopped speaking. Our family was in so much pain.
And later,
Did you know your coffee intake may actually increase your risk of migraines?
that's coming up.
Autism spectrum disorder is complicated and doesn't have a simple answer. But some say there is hope on the horizon with an electromagnetic therapy called MeRT. Joining us now in our audience is Miriam, whose daughter went through this treatment. And I'm going to go ahead and ask you, Miriam, a little bit about your daughter's autism.
Of course. Well, when she was a baby, everything seemed perfect. You know, I was able to take her to the mall in a stroller. We were able to go everywhere. But as time passed, she was around 1.5 years, everything went downhill, everything. Starting with her lack of connection to me as her mother or to anybody in the family. And one day, I remember specifically, I went up to her, I said, Raquel, and she ignored me. And then I said, Raquel, and she wouldn't turn around and look at me. And then I started screaming her name, right behind her ear, and she didn't even flinch. So I thought, she deaf? It's the first thing I thought. So I took her to the doctor the next day, and the doctor took a metal pan and threw it on the ground. And she flipped, she got scared. And he goes, congratulations, your kid's not deaf. And I said, well, if she's not deaf, what is she? What do I do? Well, I don't know. So from there, she stopped making eye contact. And I have twins, so it was very easy to compare at that age. One was doing so many things. You know, one started saying words. You know, Marcela, which is my twin, she wanted to be with me, she wanted to hug me, love me. Raquel couldn't stand my touch. She was always gone, in her own little world. And as time passed, it became worse. It was like a jail that she was trapped into. So no visual contact. She wasn't listening to her name. She wasn't following instructions. Her sister started speaking. She stopped speaking. There's nothing about her that was normal. So as time went on, things got worse because she stopped going out of the house. We couldn't take her out anymore. And so when she was a baby, she was able to go out. And when she was around 3 years old, I took her to a mall, and she screamed so much and cried so much that a gentleman asked me if she needed an ambulance. So we're not talking about like a tantrum. We're talking about full-on blown panic attacks. It almost felt like she was being attacked by the world. I didn't know how to help her. So I just didn't take her out anymore. And when I did want to just be a little stubborn and say, I want a normal day with my family and I want to take her out, she would bite herself because she was so frustrated. Also, you know, by now, she's what, 4.5 years old, she's still wearing a diaper. Our family was in so much pain. And like many moms like Leah, we do so much. I have a list this long of everything I tried, she wasn't budging.
How old was she when she was formally diagnosed?
She was formally diagnosed when she was 1.5 years with severe autism. Okay. I was told she would have to be put in a hospital eventually because you know, she was having a hard time.
And so you were trying everything, nothing was really helping. I want to ask you when you found out about this treatment we've been talking about called MeRT.
Well, okay, so she was 4.5, and I went to see a doctor in Atlanta, Georgia, and he said, listen, Miriam, you know, we've been working together for 3 years. You've done everything I've asked you to do. I can't lie to you, your kid isn't getting better. Why don't you try this at the Brain Treatment Center? This thing's called MeRT. He sort of explained to me what it was. And I just took the airplane, I just went. I wasn't even done with the conversation. I was already at the center. So I show up and they tell me what they're gonna do. They're gonna do an EEG on my daughter and tell me, you know, get a glimpse of how her brain's functioning. And I have to say, that day alone, for me, it changed my life, because you go to so many doctors with your autistic child, you don't have many answers. There's not much research out there, like you said, you pointed out. They were able to tell me who my daughter was. They were able to tell me about her attacks, her anxiety, why she wasn't speaking. It's just, I got answers for the first time just about her brain. You know, not even about anything that had to do with her diagnosis. Here's your kid's brain. And it just felt so good to have that validation that, okay, I'm not crazy. This is not normal, you know? What happened after MeRT, it just changed our lives.
Coming up.
My daughter grabs my shoulders and she parts me like this and she shakes and she goes, and then she hugs me. And then she parts my shoulders once again and she goes, and then she kisses me. It was the happiest day of my whole life.
Then, here's some video of Raquel before the treatment.
That's coming up.
Closed captioning provided by... We are back talking about autism spectrum disorder and the experimental treatment magnetic resonance therapy, or MeRT for short. On our audience is Miriam, whose daughter went through this treatment. Miriam, what changes did you see in your daughter after MeRT?
At 4.5 years old, I was gonna throw in the towel. I was tired, I was frustrated, but we did the first day of treatment. I didn't see any change the first day. The second day of treatment, it was amazing. So the first thing we noticed was she was able to go in the car and not cry, which, just so you have an idea, we hadn't taken her out of the house unless it was for medical appointments for over 1.5 years. So when we're in the car and we stayed an hour away from the center, we were able to take her and she didn't cry or hurt herself or scream. And I remember holding my breath. I'm like, oh my God, I'm looking at my husband. He's like, don't talk, just in case you startle her. Like, it was like, oh my God, is this really happening? So when we get there, my child walks up to the stairs. She goes, sits in the little chair she sat the day before, and she grabbed this, the coil that they use, and she put it on her head. She liked it. And she was able to stand that whole therapy session with other kids screaming or other parents walking around, phone calls, things that before she wasn't able to stand. So I said, okay, I'm staying no matter what, because to me, it was the first time my daughter was comfortable in her skin in many years. So that day we went back to where we were staying, and she came up to me. I was in the kitchen with my husband, and she came up to me with a little cup, and she said to me, dame más jugo, give me more juice. And those were the first words I had ever heard from my daughters.
Miriam, I just need to say really quickly, you may be nervous.
I'm very nervous.
But you just gave such a wonderful representation of what your daughter has had to go through and what you as a mother have gone through. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
I want to just take a moment, because those were her first words.
First words.
And in my mind's eye, those aren't your first words unless you've been wanting to talk.
Yes.
And
Yes.
you know what
Yes.
you want to say, but you cannot
She knew the
say it.
words.
Yes, you've been learning
And that's important for people watching. And I mean, for you as a mother, where then did she go after that point forward?
So a week later, another thing changed my life, right? So this is life-altering for me. A week later, my daughter finds out I'm her mother. Just like you're hearing it. She comes up to me and she says, upa, like that's our word for up. Right? So I carry her and I'm like, oh my God, she's letting me touch her. And my daughter grabs my shoulders and she parts me like this and she shakes and she goes, and then she hugs me. And then she parts my shoulders once again, and she goes, and then she kisses me. And I remember this day because it was the happiest day of my whole life. And my aunt said, oh my God, it looks like she's just getting to know you for the first time. Like, she's just getting to know me. She's born today. She knows I'm her mother today. And from that day on, she likes my heels. She likes my dresses. She likes my makeup. She's just a mama's girl now, as to before she had no idea.
But let me say something else. She wasn't born that day. She was born when she was born. You're right. Through the process, she knew she was loved. And so I want to say that to any parent out there who is in a situation that you were in. There's hope, right? And your story attests to that. And this is an anecdote. Look, in medicine, we always say anecdotes are anecdotes. So anecdotes are not proof. But we actually even have some video of Raquel before and after her treatment. You'll see it when we come back.
Coming up.
My daughter is autistic. She'll always be autistic, but I am proud of that. My dream is her independence and her be able to say, this is who I am.
Before the break, we met Miriam, whose daughter has tried MeRT. Here's some video of Raquel before and after the treatment.
Y la cabeza, abre la cabeza. Enséñame la cabeza. ¿Dónde está? A ver, ¿dónde está? ¿Dónde está la cabeza? ¿A dónde está? ¿A dónde está?
Ven, di, Marcelita, Marcelita.
Marcelita.
Papá, te amo.
Papá, te amo.
And I mean, Miriam, it's like a miracle. I mean, it really is. I get chills seeing that. Does she just continue to get better, or?
She did. She did. So after we're almost done with the month, I told my husband, I want to go to Disney. He goes, you crazy? I'm like, we did the mall. You're happy. She's happy in the mall. We did the park. She's happy in the park. I said, I want to go to Disney. I need to go to Disney. Like, I need to know that my daughter can be in the happiest place ever, and with all the sensory information that she couldn't stand before because she couldn't handle anything. And so we went to Disney, and she rode the carousel, and she enjoyed it. And her family felt whole for the first time. And she has gotten so much better because now she's 11, all right? And so my daughter goes to a regular school. She's above her class in math. She made her first friend this year. To me, that is like, it's a miracle on its own, you know? She can go anywhere with us. You know, she loves airplanes. If I'm leaving, she's like, I'm coming with you, right? You know, she's part of her family. And yes, you know, my daughter is autistic. She'll always be autistic, but I am proud of that. My dream is her independence and her be able to say, this is who I am, and I'll be so proud that she can do that. Her speech still needs catching up to, you know? She's 11, she started her first words at 4.5, but she can definitely do so much more now than she did before. She's able to like, let's say I went on a trip, that same day I decided to leave, and she was like, wait, you're leaving all of a sudden, is everything okay? For her to be able to understand these things, like, I never thought possible.
And I wanted to go back to you, Leah, because you've been listening to this story, and you earlier said one of your greatest hopes is that you could just hear Noam say a word. How are you feeling now listening to Miriam's story with Raquel?
I mean, just extreme excitement. You know, for whatever reason, I've been wired in such a way that since day one, I've had hope, even if I didn't know what would our answer would be, but I knew it would come. And hearing stories like yours, I mean, I've been tearing up this whole time. I'm trying to keep it together right now. So it's extremely exciting.
And as host of this show, I hate my position sometimes because I always have to be the voice of reason. And in fairness, we could have had a parent here whose child had MeRT and said, you know what? Nothing changed. And I think that is important, okay? And the reason I think that's important is because that's why people in the scientific community say stories are powerful, but you just have to acknowledge that not everyone's going to get the same response. And yet, I look at you, Leah, and I see a mom who is desperate for potentially anything. And we don't know officially, formally, if this works, but if it's something that you would like to try, and Noam is a good candidate, Brain Treatment Center in Newport Beach is offering you a full month of MeRT treatment at no cost to you. And Igala and the Free Rein Foundation are going to offer Noam 10 sessions of equine therapy, and Zeba Nasab of Holding Hands, Inc. are offering 24 sessions of music therapy, and that's all at no cost to you. As you told your story, Miriam, about Raquel, what was amazing for me is you couldn't see the people behind you, but every single person behind you was transfixed with the story that you were telling, because it was the story of a mother who was meeting her daughter for the first time. And that's powerful stuff. And so there's hope. There's always hope. Before we close out, Lindsay, I want to thank you for being here, because I think what's beautiful and what we often forget about is we don't have the treatments we need. We don't have the understanding, but there are people like Lindsay out there and Dr. Miller who are working tirelessly trying to provide whatever therapy might be beneficial. So I thank you, Lindsay. I thank you, Dr. Miller. And the other thing I would just add is we would love to follow along your journey with Noam, and I think hopefully continue this conversation. And it can almost be dangerous to talk about autism, right? Because there's so many emotions tied up in it. And this today, I feel like stories were told that hopefully people understand what you go through as a parent, and maybe, just maybe, there is hope. And that's all we can have right now, right?
Yeah.
So please keep us posted. And we are praying for you and your family. And Miriam, give Raquel a huge hug from all of us here at the Doctors.
Thank you.
And thank you again for sharing your story. And we're gonna have more information on our website in terms of MeRT therapy. We're also gonna have some information about therapies out there, behavioral therapies that have shown some benefit for children on the autism spectrum disorder. I think this is such an important topic, one we will continue to discuss. Let's take a break.